Game Boy Advance. So I finally get to talk about this thing. This here is the Game Boy Advance SP, which is the only Game Boy of any kind in my possession. Considering it covers the original Game Boy and Game Boy Color, in addition to having its own rechargeable battery pack and a backlit screen, do I really need any other system besides it? Honestly, I don't think so. Now, this originally belonged to my cousin, and many years ago we took a trip where I took it without him knowing. Eventually, he found out and said I could have it, and so it's with me now. A little while later, I would end up finding the packaging for it, which is in this box here. So I have a box to go with this Cobalt Blue Game Boy Advance SP, and personally, I think that's pretty awesome. I've been using this as a prop for my Game Boy and Game Boy Color collection videos, and now I've actually got an excuse to have it to fit, as I cover my Game Boy Advance collection currently sitting at 17 games. Let's not dilly-dally, let's take a look at them. Golden Sun: The Lost Age. When I first got this game, I didn't realize it was a straight-up continuation from the first game, so it felt a little weird, but back then I didn't mind. The cartridge itself looks okay, and it generally runs about $40 as of recording time. I definitely need to get the first game to pair this thing, though. Fire Emblem: The Sacred Stones. This right here is my sole Fire Emblem game in my entire collection. Though it's not because I don't particularly like the series, quite frankly I do, it's just attempts to get other Fire Emblem games have not really proven fruitful. So, this remains the only one I've got. The cartridge is okay, but there is some sticker residue on the back. As it is right now, the cartridge runs around $50 to $60, but it is helped by the fact that I've got the player's guide for the game. Here's a strategy guide, which has certainly seen better days. There's some sticker residue up here, something happened right here, but most importantly, the spine is definitely screwed. There's some wear right there, and damage towards the bottom. Beyond that, at least the back page looks good, and all the pages inside look fine as well. It's an okay looking guide, and it's nice to have it with that game. I just wish I could find other Fire Emblem games with relative ease. Metroid Zero Mission. This was the game I got with my Game Boy Advance SP when my cousin decided to give it to me. It's a pretty decent game, and it's a remake of the original Metroid on NES. Overall, cartridge looks alright, though it is kind of surprising to see it be as pricey as it is now, with the cartridge itself being around $65 to $70 and completes being near $200. Metroid Fusion. While a good game in its own right, I mainly picked this up to pair it with Metroid Zero Mission. This label does seem a bit faded, but that's really the only fault with the cartridge itself. It is a good chunk cheaper than Zero Mission though, with the cartridge being around $45 to $50 and completes being around $125. The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap. I mainly got this game on a whim because I heard about the Minish Cap several times, and finding it, I was just able to snag it. I never did finish the game though, unfortunately, though I might play it for the channel sometime. Cartridge itself looks okay, a little bit of wear on the backside, but that's really the only issue. The price is about the same as Metroid Zero Mission, with the cartridge being about $75 as of recording and completes around $200. Zoid's Legacy. This one's an RPG based on the Zoids anime series, but is one I didn't really play too much, although I have heard the translation is a total train wreck, so maybe I'm not missing much. Cartridge itself looks okay, and it's a bit uncommon. Cartridge itself typically runs around $50 to $60. Ice 9. This game's pretty interesting, as it's my only true rarity of a game that is debatably bad, as it's a mediocre first-person shooter that was supposed to be based on the 2003 film The Recruit, which didn't do so well, so they changed the title and made something else out of it. Not exactly helping it is the rather generic cover art, which is probably one of the big reasons why the game was only $15 maximum at one point. Since then, it's climbed up significantly to about 100 plus, and as of now is currently sitting around 200 for just the cartridge, which is quite surprising. My copy's label is in decent shape, though there is some sticker residue on the back, and that's really the only fault for it. Complete copies of the game, however, are quite rare, and it's really hard to put a solid price figure on them as a result. Sonic Advance. While I did beat this game, I mainly got this game because of Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. Of course, this game has a Tiny Chow Garden, so I just linked this into the GameCube in order to 100% complete that game a bit quicker. This box is the worst looking of my Game Boy Advance boxes, but still better than some I've seen before. Just some crushing on the sides, a little bit of damage on this corner, but otherwise, it still looks pretty decent. Here's a look inside, featuring the instruction manual, which is in excellent shape. Only a tiny bit of spyware towards the bottom, and that's about it. Even the cover page doesn't have any wear whatsoever, and that's pretty nice. The precautions booklet, the Nintendo Power insert, and the cartridge, which has no label scratches whatsoever, despite being heavily used because Tiny Chow Garden exploits. I certainly use this one a bunch. The cartridge itself isn't too expensive, only about $20, but a complete copy is currently running around $70 to $75. Final Fantasy 1 and 2 Dawn of Souls. This game was my first taste of Final Fantasy 2, as I was familiar with the first game because I had it on the NES. However, I didn't actually finish this game because just a couple months later I would find the PSP version, which did the same thing. This box does have some noticeable wear. There's a bit of crushing on this bottom left corner. Other than that, kind of the usual stuff for a standard Game Boy box. Just standard wear and a little tiny bit of damage, but nothing too crazy. Look inside here. Here is the instruction manual, which is in immaculate shape. No yellowing of the cover page, and all the pages look good. Not even a lick of spine wear either. Precautions booklet, the Nintendo Power insert, the Game Boy insert, which covers the Game Boy player and the Game Boy Advance SP, and finally the cartridge, which is in pretty nice shape with no real label scratching. This is one of my cheapest complete in box games, sitting at about $40 as I'm recording this, but it's still pretty nice to have, especially when paired with, well, everything else coming up. The cheapness is bolstered by the fact that I've got the player's guide for the game, though. It's got a couple marks here on the front side, a tiny bit of spine wear up here, and the back side has a little fading up top. Other than that, looks really good, all the pages are fine, and also the map section here is in excellent shape. Overall, a really solid guide. Final Fantasy IV Advance. Much like my first time playing Final Fantasy II, this is the first time I played the 2D version of Final Fantasy IV, as I played the DS version first. This box is in okay shape. It's a little worse than 1 and 2 Dawn of Souls, with a little bit of damage right there, but otherwise, it looks pretty decent for what it is. Here's a look inside, featuring the instruction manual, which is in immaculate shape, not a single bit of spine wear or any fading whatsoever, and that's pretty good. There is the precautions booklet, the Nintendo Power insert, the Game Boy player insert, and finally this promotional insert, which covers Final Fantasy 1 and 2, as well as the soon-to-be-released Tales of Phantasia. And now we got the cartridge here, which is also in really good shape, and that's really all I have to say about it. A complete copy of this game is currently running around $60 to $65, but it is bolstered by, like Final Fantasy 1 and 2, also having the player's guide. Here is the player's guide for it, which has some issues with the spine, but otherwise looks pretty good. Mainly you can see some nicks right here, tiny bit of wear near the top, and some sticker residue up front. The spine itself is pretty yellow, you can kind of see it, and most especially right here, and a little yellowing up top. Other than that, the pages all look good, and this map section has no flaws whatsoever. A decent looking guide. Final Fantasy V Advance. It took a while for me to find this game complete, but I eventually pulled through and got it, making the last of the mainline Final Fantasy games on the Game Boy Advance to be so. This is the worst looking of the boxes, though. There's a bit of crushing on the corners, as you can kind of see, and there's also a special bit right about there. The rest of the sides also have some damage as well, but in this case, I was just happy I was able to get it boxed Final Fantasy V. This one's got quite a bit of stuff inside, starting with the instruction manual, which is pretty immaculate, minus a fold on this very back page, and only this back page. Other than that, it looks pristine without any wear whatsoever. Precautions booklet, the Nintendo Power insert, the Game Boy player insert, the DS Lite insert, since this was active at the time, the DS promotional insert for a couple games, and finally the cartridge itself, which is in excellent shape, and I'm happy I was able to get this one. Too bad. There's the focus, thank you very much. A complete copy of this game is currently running around $80. Sadly, I do not have the player's guide for this one, though I am actively hunting for it so I could complete the whole set. Final Fantasy VI Advance. This game had a very late release. So late that this was the very last game to get released for the Game Boy Advance in Asia. And personally, I can't think of a better way to send off any system than releasing it with a game this good, especially for a console as deserving as the Game Boy Advance. This is easily my best looking of the mainline Final Fantasy games, as there's only a couple nicks, but other than that, it's just a little minor corner wear across all the sides, and that's about it. Easily a great looking box for this thing. Unlike most of my other box Game Boy Advance games, this has just the manual and that's it. There's a little waviness on the front page and a little bit of spine wear, but otherwise it looks as excellent as the others. And then you've got the cartridge, which has a couple label scratches, but that's really the only faults with it. The cartridge itself is currently running around $60 as I record this, and a complete copy runs around $125 to $130. Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. This is a very recent addition to my collection, being claimed on January 24th. As a result, I haven't played it too much, but I mainly got it because it was the last Final Fantasy game on the Game Boy Advance that I didn't have boxed up. This box is actually in good shape, minus this little crushing spot right there. But other than that, the rest of the box looks excellent. You can't go wrong with that. Here's a look inside, featuring the instruction manual, which has a little black spot right here. Don't know really what happened, but it's there. Some slight folds on the corners, and there's a bit of folding on the back page. It's a decent looking manual, but easily the worst of my Final Fantasy ones. This here is a promotional insert featuring some games that were active and coming soon at the time. And finally, the cartridge, which is in great shape. And I'm still playing through this a little bit, but again, I've got other games I'm more active in, so I haven't put too much into this game. A complete copy of this game is currently running around $70 to $75. Here is the player's guide, which would have looked amazing were it not for the fact that the spine has some issues. You can kind of see some marks right here and right here very visibly in the light. And there is some wear pretty much across this front of the spine. But other than that, no yellowing or anything wrong whatsoever. All the pages are white. Overall, a fantastic looking guide. Tales of Phantasia. This was a game I wanted to finish, but ultimately didn't do so, and that's a bit of a bummer, because I was liking this game. Just stuff got ahead of me. This front is a bit crushed, as you can see, especially on the bottom, but the rest of the box looks okay, apart from the front, and it's not bad otherwise. Here's a look inside, featuring the instruction manual, which only the cover page has really some issues. You can see it on the front right here. If I just flip the back side, you can kind of see all the wear as well. It's only the cover page that's really the problem. The rest of the manual looks excellent. The precautions booklet, Nintendo Power insert, Game Boy Player insert, and finally the cartridge, which has no label scratches whatsoever and looks really good. I wish I did get to finish this game, but hopefully I'll give it a little more time this year and be able to properly finish it. A complete copy of this game currently sits at around $75 to $80. Tactics Ogre: The Knight of Lotus. This game is amazing. I put a good chunk of time into it and beat it once, and it was totally worth the trip. Now this box is a bit worn, you can definitely see it up top, but there's no crushing whatsoever, and that's always a good sign. All the sides look pretty good, and there is a rental sticker right at that barcode, unfortunately, but that's really the only serious blemish with this box, apart from the wear, of course. Here's a look inside, featuring the instruction manual, which is in incredible shape and very thick too. It's 66 pages. No real flaws whatsoever, minus a little wear right on the very top corner. And that's about it. Precautions booklet, the Nintendo Power insert, and the uncommon registration card. You definitely do not see this often in complete copies. And finally, the cartridge, which has some label scratching, but otherwise looks really good. As of recording time, the cartridge currently sits at around $60, and a complete copy runs around $160. Still, if you like Final Fantasy Tactics Advance or the original Tactics Ogre, you definitely want to hunt this game down. Boktai. This one's real cool, and basically a kid-friendly Metal Gear Solid. Helps by the fact that Kojima's the one who produced it. This box is in amazing shape. There's a tiny bit of wear on that one side, and a bit of scratching on the backside here. You can kind of see it from the light right about there. But otherwise, this looks incredible for a box. Here's a look inside, featuring the instruction manual, which is in great shape, minus a little scuffing on the top corner, much like Tactics Ogre. On top of that, there's also a bit of blackening right at the spine right about here. You can kind of see it. Otherwise, looks pretty good. The precautions booklet, the Nintendo Power insert, and the specialized cartridge that Boktai puts itself in. You see, it's clear for a reason and has this little jutting out part, because right here, that little black chip is a solar sensor, which is what makes the main game function. And that makes it, yeah, pretty cool. The label itself only has a couple scratches on the label, but that's about it. Now, this game, the cartridge has been running around $100 for at least the past 2.5 years, and complete copies were in the 200s, but have since cooled down over the past couple months and currently sit at about 180. Though, do not be surprised if it's still seeing at 200. Boktai 2. I've seen a few copies of the first Boktai since I got mine, but this remains the only time I have ever seen Boktai 2, cartridge or otherwise. In addition, because it mushroomed in price in the last quarter of 2020, it has held the record as the most expensive game in my collection for my handheld system since that price explosion. The game itself is a good improvement over the first game, mainly in terms of more weapons since the first game gave you just the solar gun and that was it, so you have a little bit of variety to play. Now, this box isn't in the best of shape, mainly because the bottom is taped because somebody tried to open it from the bottom. Yikes. In addition, there's a little fold on the flap right here, but that's really the only faults with this box. Hell, to be honest, the tape isn't even noticeable if you stand the thing up. Inside here is the usual contents, the instruction manual, which is in amazing shape. The only real faults with it are just a bit of edge wear. You can kind of see it on the corner on the bottom. And the back page doesn't have any issues either, which is very nice. Precautions booklet, Nintendo Power insert, and the game cartridge, which has a few surface scratches, but not as many as the first Boktai. Now, like the first Boktai, this cartridge has been commanding about $100 for quite a while now, and at one point was fetching $200, and that's pretty ridiculous. Around that time, a complete copy was hitting around 300 plus, pushing near 400. It has since cooled down a little bit and is currently sitting around 130 for a cartridge and 250 for a complete copy. Still, it's a pretty hard game to get, and I'm glad I was able to get it before it exploded in price the way it did. That is my Game Boy Advance collection as of this video's upload date. Quite a few really good games, and I know of quite a few others that I'm definitely hunting. Speaking of that, here are my top 5 targets for the Game Boy Advance coming right now. My top priority is Golden Sun. Self-explanatory, pair it with Lost Age and have the two combined. My second priority was Final Fantasy Tactics Advance at the start of the year, but I got it. So moving up the ranks becomes Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga. I've had a few opportunities to get this game, but I didn't pull the trigger on each time. Though it's a game I see pretty often, so it's not a huge concern. I just want to get it because I heard it's a good game, and I liked Mario & Luigi Dream Team on the 3DS. My third priority is Sonic Battle. This is a pretty awesome game, and I used to have a copy of it. Unfortunately, my copy became a casualty of my September purge. So I just gotta find another copy, and I feel like it's gonna be pretty tough to find, though when I do find it, it's gonna be pretty satisfying. It is an awesome game, though. My fourth priority is Shining Force Resurrection of the Dark Dragon. It's an updated version of the original Sega Genesis game, and while I would like the Sega Genesis game as top priority for that system, this is simply the better game and has a little bit of extra content. I did find the game recently, but I passed on that in favor of Crash Bandicoot for the PlayStation. I'll get to it eventually. And rounding out the top 5 is Super Robot Tyson Original Generation. This is also a game I had in my collection that was a victim of my September purge. So if I find it again, it'd be pretty nice considering I didn't really play that game too much. I just didn't really give it much of a chance. Though I do know a second game exists, and if that shows up, I'm going to try my best to go after that game first, since not only did I not have it, but it's also a bit more expensive than the first game. Of course, there's like 20 or 30 other games I want to get for the Game Boy Advance since they're all pretty cool, but I'll find them when I do. The 5 I mentioned were just the ones of biggest priority as of this video's recording. And that's all I've got to say and show. If you like what you saw, feel free to drop a like. If you're interested in seeing how I update my collection, hit that subscribe button. But until then, I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.